guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, I Trespassed, You Pay for the Damages. Not my story, that of a colleague who trained me for my job. Also, on mobile and English isn't my first language and so on. I'll call my colleague Dan, not his real name. Dan was a train dispatcher, now retired. The job requires us to make sure that trains can arrive and depart safely, at the right platform and whatnot. We're basically boss of the station and responsible to ensure safety of people working on the tracks. Just to give you a little insight in the job. Well, Dan has 3 crossings under his control where the gates block the whole street. So, to ensure that nothing is locked in on the tracks, there are cameras, no recordings, just a live picture, that need to be checked before he can allow a train to cross. There are always some idiots who think they can still make it, even when the gates are lowering already, and even though the traffic lights turn red before the bars even move. And so was our entitled dude, Ed from here on, this time. He drove a very new, very expensive sports car and sped under the gates, but didn't make it. While leaving the crossing, the gate fell on his car. Both car and gate were damaged, but Ed wouldn't stop. He drove off just to get the cops and a lawyer involved. Ed actually tried to sue the train company for the damages on his car. Big mistake. Ed was laughed right out of court. Instead of being paid for his damages, he got a fine for trespassing, for driving over a red traffic light, and had to pay for the damages on the gate and for his own car, of course. Usually nothing happens to those idiots because we can't track back who decided risking their lives would be worth 5 minutes. But this guy's greed dug him his own grave. The next story is titled, Why Trim the Branches When You Can Cut Down the Whole Tree? TLDR. Neighbor tried to fake a city fine so she wouldn't lose a few dollars trimming some branches by her bedroom window. Instead, we cut down the whole tree, and she lost all the shade and privacy the tree provided. One day I came home, and my mom told me the right side neighbor talked to her. Neighbor claimed a city official came over while we weren't there, stopped by her house and asked her to pass along a message. The tree on our side of the fence is too unruly, and a few branches are getting too close to the neighbor's house. The city will fine us if we don't cut down those branches. So, the city was going to fine us without an official notice? I was certain that the neighbor either got the warning herself or was lying for some free gardening. It was our tree, so we would have done it if they had asked properly, but my mom and I decided to just cut it down, so it didn't become an issue again. She sent me over to let the neighbors know, and after some pleasantries I told her of our decision. Her expression immediately darkened. The tree is in a perfect place to cover my bedroom window from the sun, and it give me plenty of privacy. Wouldn't it be cheaper to trim it? Cue malicious compliance to the city warning. I told her with a concerned face that we're anxious about the city's fine, and that if we had to keep trimming it, it would be costly and a huge headache. At that point some slight panic seeped into her voice, and she offered to pay for the trimming herself. In other words, we wouldn't have to do a thing nor pay a single penny. A better man would have said yes. But by this point, I was a bitter man. I kept a concerned face and told her if I ever left, no plans to because of my mom's health, my mom would have to deal with it, and I wouldn't want her to have to keep checking in with the neighbor for fear of a fine. At the end of the day, our tree, our fine, our decision. I left shortly after. The tree came down that weekend. And so did the neighbor's blinds to her bedroom. A few years since then, and as of yet I still haven't seen them go back up. And to think, if she had just asked nicely, we would still be trimming those branches at no cost to her. The next story is titled, Racism and House Paint. This happened where I lived in college. It was a very liberal and progressive city, which was one of the reasons I chose to live there, so this incident really stuck with me. This one neighborhood on the outskirts of the city was a bunch of old, but still in good shape, tract homes, with the majority of them being homeowner-occupied, and had a primarily Hispanic, Latin population. Well, as home prices skyrocketed, this neighborhood became one of the few affordable places to buy a home in the whole county. My friend and her brother had bought their house while the prices were still decent, and I was renting a room there. We are white but love the culture and are not trying to change it. It was the kind of place where on Fridays we would walk down to the neighborhood park where a bunch of taco trucks set up and eat and hang out with the neighbors. Everyone was very welcoming, and we got invited to all kinds of cookouts, quinceañeras, and the first funeral I had ever been to that was a huge party with dancing and laughter that truly celebrated the person's life. Still one of my favorite neighborhoods ever. One day we are out front talking to the neighbor across the street, who is super nice and friendly. Suddenly this older white woman quickly waddles up to us and just starts talking. She doesn't even introduce herself, but I think we all know she is Karen. Karen is talking to the neighbor in that very exaggerated way that means she doesn't think he speaks English, so she must speak loudly with big gestures. This is just straight up racist based on his looks because we were speaking English when she rolled up on us. She tells him, not asks him, but tells him that it is time for him to paint his house. At this point she is doing over exaggerated Karate Kid paint the fence gestures and saying, paint. You know, paint the house. We are all stunned into silence with what the hell? Looks on our faces as she keeps going. That light blue is no good. Shakes her finger in his face. No good, it's too bright. Shields her eyes from the house like she was looking into the sun. Too bright, do you understand? Now, there is no HOA or city ordinance limiting the colors of the houses in this neighborhood, but none of the houses had any unusual or unique colors. These were tract homes with only about 5 different colors when they were built, and most of them were the original color or something similar. The neighbor's house was still the original color, so this light blue is not unique at all. It's literally one of the most basic colors and is on a lot of homes that were built during that time. Also, the paint on his house was in good condition, not peeling or anything. So, my roommate, the neighbor, and I all find our voices at about the same time, with my roommate saying, "What the duck are you talking about?" I'm like, "Who the duck are you?" And the neighbor going off in a tirade of very loud and fast Spanish, but Karen is undaunted in her quest. Realizing my roommate and I speak English, she starts telling us how she just moved in and she's trying to protect her home's value, and it's obviously time for him to paint the house, and she wants the neighborhood to have a certain color palette with more neutral tones instead of this carnival thing that was going on now. Yes, she pronounced it like the celebration in Rio but over-exaggerated, and it was clear she had never been to carnival or even seen pictures of carnival because, again, the houses were mostly the same boring colors from when they were built or similar. My roommate and I keep interrupting her and telling her she is being racist. Nobody cares what she wants. The paint looks fine. She has no right to tell him what color he can paint his house. And this neighborhood's culture was established long before she showed up, so if she doesn't like it, she can move because she shouldn't have moved here in the first place with that attitude. Suddenly, the neighbor waves his hands in front of our faces while saying, "No, no, no, no," and then pointing to himself, and that's when we realized the neighbor is acting like he doesn't speak English. Since roommate and I know he speaks perfect English at this point, we are just trying to contain our laughter, waiting to see what he is going to do. Well, he starts talking to Karen in Spanish the same slow, loud way she was talking to him in English, complete with big gestures and everything. Now I don't know Spanish very well, but from what I could understand he is telling her the colors of the houses in the neighborhood and how her house is blue, darker shade, and his house is blue, so what is her problem? Karen clearly doesn't understand and is getting more and more upset, but when she looks at us for help, we tell her that we don't understand what he's saying either. Karen is fuming and we are trying and failing to contain our laughter. This goes on for just a couple of minutes before the neighbor's 10-year-old son comes out on their porch and loudly asks him if they are going to grandma's for dinner, in perfect English. The neighbor then turns to his son and says they are leaving as soon as mom gets back from the store, also in perfect English. He then turns back to Karen and starts speaking to her in Spanish again, and although I don't know exactly what he said to her, there was definitely some swearing and at least one not nice name to call a woman. He then says to us, "See you Friday for dinner," in English, and walks away. It takes Karen a few seconds to realize what is going on, then her face turns bright red, and she is just sputtering, unable to put together a complete sentence. We just walked away, still laughing. Now here is the malicious compliance part, I think. A couple of weeks later I'm out of town for a couple of days and get back very late at night. As I'm getting my bags out of the car, I realize that it is very bright out. I know it's a full moon, but something is just not right. I start looking around thinking one of the neighbors must have put in some walkway lighting or maybe even a floodlight over the garage. And that's when I see it. The neighbor across the street had done what Karen wanted and painted his house, a beautiful bright orange. And I mean, this thing was practically neon. Under the light of the full moon the house actually looked like it glowed in the dark, and that was why it was especially bright out in the middle of the night. I laughed so hard I was in tears. The next day, seeing it in the daylight, the color was actually more of a peach than a neon and looked nice, but for whatever reason it was glow in the dark orange at night. Some might even call it a carnival orange. It surprised no one that Karen turned her home into a rental and moved somewhere else. The next story is titled, Landlord Wanted Us to Mow the Lawn. TLDR. They asked us to mow the lawn. But the lawn was long gone and only weeds remained. So, we told them that we would happily mow the lawn if they provided us with one. In college, I rented a house with a couple of roommates. We probably should have looked into the landlord a bit further before renting. But it was a bit of a small college town where the college had outgrown the available housing, so we were desperate for whatever we could get. Shortly after signing the lease, a family member sent me an article about what a slumlord the landlord was. But there wasn't much to do about it at that point. In the end, they were slow and cheap about fixing things, but they pretty much left us alone, unlike some of the other college town landlords. So, it wasn't too bad. The house had a small backyard. I believe that the yard had once contained a lawn. But one of the consequences of the landlords refusing to put any time or money into the place was that, when we moved in, the whole backyard was just a sea of tall weeds. This didn't really bother us, so we just left it. But apparently it bothered one of our neighbors, because they went to our landlord, who sent us a letter telling us that, according to the lease, it was our responsibility to take care of it. I feel a bit bad for the neighbor here, because they did have to live near this eyesore. But we didn't create the problem. And we didn't feel like it was our job to do something about it. So, we took a look at the lease and found that it said, I'm paraphrasing here. This was a while ago, it is the tenant's responsibility to mow the lawn. After spending some time thinking about this, we came to the conclusion that what we had couldn't rightly be called a lawn. And the lease only specified that we were responsible for mowing the lawn. So, we sent back a letter saying, we would be happy to mow the lawn, if you would provide us with one. We really didn't want to have to mow a lawn. We didn't have a mower, and I'm sure that the landlord would not have provided us with one. But, by that point, we had become familiar with how cheap and lazy they were, and we bet that they would rather ignore our neighbor than either argue with us about it or replace the weeds with a lawn. And we appear to have been correct, because we lived there for probably another 3.5 years, and we never heard another word about it. There are a couple of other funny stories about them, so here's another quick bonus story. They were trying to sell most of their properties out from under their tenants. At one point they brought someone in to tour our house while we were living in it. And the landlord, while giving the tour, had the audacity to ask us how the house was heated. When we pointed to the crappy furnace, not the HVAC kind, basically just a box that got hot, they asked aren't there baseboard heaters in the bedrooms? Which there was. In just one bedroom. Upstairs. Which never needed it, because it was upstairs, and all the heat ended up there anyways. Edit. To be clear, I considered the compliance in this case to be complying with the lease. We did exactly what it said, just maybe not what the landlord apparently hoped. The last story is titled, Don't Open the Door for Anybody? You got it, Mom. I was allowed to stay home alone when I was around 10 years old. That may seem a bit young, but I had a strong sense of safety skills and followed my mother's rules to a T. Don't use the stove, don't answer the house phone unless it's mom or dad, and don't open the door for anybody, even those that we knew. I lived in an apartment building where everyone knows everybody, and we were all very close. Sometimes we go to each other's places to either borrow something or visit. One day, my mom told me she was going to the store and as usual, she'd sternly tell me not to open the door for anybody. We did have people knock on the door and I'd check to see who was there, but I'd never answer, and I was very quiet when I would check the peephole and watch TV at a low volume. My siblings, however, they had some sort of anxiety and often broke the rule. When my mom found out, she was obviously quite angry and told me once again to not open the door for anybody. QMC. After my mom left, I was completely alone, no siblings, nobody, just me. 15 minutes later, I get a knock at the door. I quietly walk over and check the peephole to check who it was. It was the neighbor who came over frequently. I ignored, but she constantly kept knocking. After knocking and waiting at the door for about 10 minutes, she left. When my mom came home, she asked if anybody knocked on our door out of plain curiosity. I told her the neighbor did and was there for a while, but I didn't answer. My mom immediately gets angry with me and said that the neighbor wanted to borrow some food item from the kitchen and that I should have answered the door. I wasn't aware because my mom didn't bother to call me stating that it was okay. Usually, my mom would call me to let me know in case anybody was coming to get something or drop something off, but this time she didn't. I simply shrugged my shoulders and said, "You said don't open the door for anybody. Even those that we know." My mom realized her mistake and then changed the rule from don't open the door for anybody to don't open the door for anybody except people we knew. Edit. Some of you got a bit concerned regarding the rule change, so I thought I might clarify as I forgot to add detail. We still didn't open the door for anyone after the rule change unless and only my mom called and told us if we were to expect anyone that we knew, so yes, it should have been changed to don't open the door for anybody except for people that we knew, and mom says it's okay to open the door for. English isn't my mom's first language, and whenever she made a rule growing up, there was often more to the rules, but it wasn't added as my mom was very vague about them. Sorry, I forgot to add detail. Thanks for listening.